An exciting weekend unfolded at the Italian Grand Prix. Red Bull was under the pump from Ferrari, a sight we haven't seen in a while. The race was a dry one, a first since the Miami Grand Prix in May. This meant the drivers had to wrangle with the fastest circuit of the calendar, not an easy feat. Amongst the thrills and spills, certain drivers stood out. Max Verstappen delivered a sterling performance, garnering a 7 out of 10 rating. Missing pole position by just a whisker, Verstappen overtook Carlos Sainz on the 15th lap, securing his record-breaking 10th consecutive victory. A marvelous feat. Sergio Perez had a rocky ride though, finishing second, 6 seconds behind Verstappen. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz Jr. both garnered a commendable 7 and 8 out of 10 respectively, showing strong performances throughout the race. The question that lingers now, who's going to bring the heat in the next race? Any guesses, folks? Hello, everyone. This is your host Enzo bringing you the most exciting updates from the world of Formula One. And I'm William, here to provide my 2 pence on all things racing. We are part of your daily life here on F1 Motor Fever podcast, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's put the pedal to the metal. Off we go. How about a slice of trivia for all the racing enthusiasts out there? Did you know that the Monza circuit, where the Italian Grand Prix takes place, is one of the oldest in the world? It was built back in 1922 and it's one of the fastest circuits on the calendar. Also, Max Verstappen's recent victory breaks yet another record, marking his 10th consecutive win. This is an astounding achievement given the competitive nature of Formula One. A testament to his skill and the strategic brilliance of his team, wouldn't you agree, folks? Well, the 2023 Italian Grand Prix was truly a fascinating weekend. The absence of Red Bull's usual edge was quite noticeable. Ferrari seemed to be pushing the envelope, giving them a tougher competition than usual. This, coupled with the absence of rain, the first time since Miami in May, made for an intense racing weekend. It was a test for many drivers, and some did manage to shine through. Max Verstappen certainly scored well, earning a 7 out of 10. Hold on there, Enzo. You lost me a bit. Could you elaborate on Verstappen's performance at the Grand Prix? Of course, William Turner. Verstappen showed great patience and strategy during the race. He didn't rush for pole position, and instead held back, preserving his second place in the early stages. When the opportunity presented itself on lap 15, Verstappen overtook Sainz to claim the lead. He cleverly pitted for hard tires and retook the lead from Hamilton, gradually building a gap. Despite a minor setback, catching a €500 fine for speeding in the pit, Verstappen remained undeterred. He built a lead of almost 13 seconds, then was asked to back off to cool his car. Still, he managed to claim his record-breaking 10th consecutive Grand Prix victory, finishing 6 seconds ahead of his teammate. That puts things into perspective. Verstappen really did play his cards right. As a side note, much of this detailed insight comes from an article published on the 5th of September, 2023, on the RaceFans site. The author of the article is Will Wood. Have you come across this site, William? Yes, indeed. RaceFans is a reputable site and quite popular among the Formula One community. Although it's always prudent to cross-reference information to ensure accuracy. Absolutely, well said. Now, let's carry on with more insights from the Grand Prix. Speaking of Perez, it reminds me of a time when I was a sports reporter. I had just started, and my first assignment was to cover a local race. I made a mistake and missed out on a critical part of the race. But the lesson there was to keep going, just as Perez did. Despite his early crash and being out-qualified, he did not let it define his race. He managed to finish just where he should have been, behind his teammate. Ha, Enzo, you comparing yourself to Perez now, are you? Not really, William. It's just an observation that mistakes don't define the outcome. It's about resilience and the heart to keep going. I do apologize, Enzo. You're absolutely right. It's about bouncing back from those mistakes and moving forward. No need to apologize, William. Let's move on to Charles Leclerc, shall we? Despite being constantly a step behind his teammate, Leclerc put up a strong performance overall. His battle with Sainz in the final laps was quite thrilling to watch. But let's not forget Carlos Sainz Jr., he was the real star. Even though he's been lacking a standout performance all season, this was his best weekend. He secured his first pole of the season, led the race initially, and fought hard to maintain his position. He even managed to hold off his teammate over the final laps to take his first Monza podium in a Ferrari. A truly commendable drive. Carrying on with our race analysis, let's talk about Sainz's performance a bit more. From Friday to Saturday, he was in brilliant form. His pole lap might have been his best in a Ferrari yet. Sainz showed real spirit in his fight against the Red Bulls and did his utmost to keep them at bay as long as he could. His podium finish was well-deserved after fending off his teammate in those final laps. By far, this was his best weekend of the season so far. And let's not forget about George Russell. He outperformed his teammate and secured a favorable fourth spot on the grid, despite the Mercedes not having the pace of the Red Bulls and Ferraris. In fact, Russell managed to keep Perez behind him for 15 laps longer than expected. His maneuver to skip the chicane to stay ahead of Ocon was cheeky, but somehow, he got away with it. Absolutely, William. I've got a brother who's a massive George Russell fan. He'd be chuffed to bits to hear about his performance at Monza. Now, as for Lewis Hamilton, he had a bit of a struggle. Despite not matching his teammate in qualifying and starting behind Piastri and Albon, he managed to secure a result that fairly reflected Mercedes' potential at Monza. It wasn't a smooth ride, considering his clash with Piastri that earned him a 5-second penalty. But, as we all know, Hamilton is a fighter, and he did manage to finish 6th, despite the penalty. As we dig deeper into the race results, we see that Hamilton, despite his clash with Piastri, did manage to stick with the McLarens and make crucial passes in his stint on mediums. Esteban Ocon, however, had a bit of a rougher time. Despite not doing anything to disgrace himself, he was forced to retire due to steering concerns. Indeed, Enzo. And Pierre Gasly, despite having the slightest edge over Ocon in qualifying, found himself confined by the Alpine's base performance. Finishing in 15th, not the result he would have hoped for. You're right there, William. Also, let's not forget Lando Norris. Outqualified by his rookie teammate, he still managed to finish ahead despite having a McLaren that wasn't as strong as in recent rounds. True, Enzo. And speaking of McLaren, did you catch Norris dropping Verstappen's trophy at the end of the race? Ha ha ha, yeah, saw that. Priceless. Who knew Norris had a knack for juggling, too? Ha ha ha, I don't think juggling trophies was part of the driver's training, Enzo. Maybe it should be, eh? Imagine the suspense after each race. Will they drop the trophy? Adds a whole new layer to the sport, doesn't it? Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, certainly a spectacle, that. But let's hope the trophy dropping stays a rarity, Enzo, or they'll have to start making spare trophies. As we continue with our race breakdown, it's interesting to note that Norris, despite being outqualified by his teammate, managed to get ahead of Hamilton with his medium tyres. However, despite several attempts, he just couldn't find a way past the Williams in the second half of the race. And then there's Piastri, who managed to outshine both his teammate and Hamilton during qualifying. Quite impressive, wouldn't you say, Enzo? Absolutely, William Turner. That reminds me of a track day I had years ago. I was up against some hotshots in faster cars, but I managed to outqualify them all in my beat-up old saloon. It's about the driver, not the car, right? Ha ha ha, sure Enzo, I'd love to see you try that against Hamilton or Verstappen. Well, I did say it was just a local track day, didn't I? No need to scoff, William Turner. Sorry, Enzo Watts. No offense intended. I suppose we all have our moments of racing glory, whether it's on a global stage or a local track. Well said, William. Now, back to the race analysis. Let's not forget Valtteri Bottas, who managed a rare top 10 finish for Alfa Romeo this year. He gained 4 places from his starting position, quite an achievement considering there were no safety cars, retirements or penalties for cars ahead. Moving further into the pack, Zhou Guanyu had a relatively average weekend. Despite not making any significant mistakes and maintaining a stable pace, his early switch to hard tyres did not pay off. Zhou finished in 14th, somewhat stuck in the middle of the action. It seems like the strategy just didn't work out for him, Enzo. Yes, exactly, William. It's a tough balance, knowing when to switch tyres and whether a 1-stop or 2-stop strategy will pay off in the end. And let's not forget Lance Stroll. Indeed, Stroll had a difficult weekend. Missing the first practice session and having only 1 lap in FP2 due to a fuel system problem must have been a setback. Absolutely, William. He was eliminated slowest in Q1 and started from the back of the grid. Despite these challenges, he managed to overtake a few drivers and finished as the last car on the lead lap in 16th. But let's be clear, the weekend was compromised from the beginning. Yes, Enzo, it seems like Stroll's weekend was indeed a tough one. As they say, the race can be won or lost in the preparation, and missing out on the opening practice session certainly didn't help Stroll's cause. Moving on to Fernando Alonso, who had a relatively decent weekend, although not quite impressive. Qualifying 10th and finishing 9th doesn't tell the whole story. Yes, Enzo. Alonso was up against it, wasn't he? With the Aston Martin not performing particularly well over the weekend. Right you are, William. Alonso could potentially have fought harder to keep Hamilton behind after the undercut, but he held his own for the most part, finishing positive on his starting position. And what about Kevin Magnussen, Enzo? Magnussen. A challenging weekend for him and Haas. He started 19th and only managed to finish 18th, at the back of the field for most of the race. His performance was, frankly, a bit underwhelming. He did claim that the maximum qualifying time rule was a factor in his elimination in Q1. Seems like a convenient excuse, doesn't it, Enzo? It does, William. But let's not forget, Formula One is as much about strategy and interpretation of the rules as it is about pure speed. And lastly, Nico Hülkenberg, starting 13th, outperformed his teammate by 6 places in the qualifying. Nico Hülkenberg's weekend was a tale of two halves. He outqualified his teammate and got off to a brilliant start, only to slide down the order as the race progressed. A rather frustrating situation for him, as his result wasn't reflective of his performance. Yes, Enzo, an unfortunate outcome indeed. And speaking of unfortunate, Yuki Tsunoda didn't even get to start the race due to a power unit issue. That's right, William. It's always a pity when technical issues prevent a driver from showcasing their skills on the track. Nonetheless, Tsunoda performed well in qualifying, securing one of his better grid positions of the season. And then we have Liam Lawson. Yes, Lawson, a driver who had a commendable weekend. He completed his full practice program for the first time and lined up 12th on the grid, directly behind Tsunoda. Despite an illegal overtake by Piastri, Lawson held his own, finishing 11th after penalties were applied. A promising performance for a young driver. It certainly seems like he has potential, Enzo. It will be interesting to see how he progresses throughout the season. Let's move on to Alexander Albon's performance. This was another weekend where Albon showed his tenacity and defensive driving skills. Starting 6th, he lost a place at the start but quickly reclaimed it. Yes, his one-stop strategy seemed to work well for him, didn't it, Enzo? Indeed, William. An early pit stop on lap 15 for hard tyre saw him fall to 13th, but he managed to work his way back up to 6th. He ended up 7th after coming under pressure from Norris, but it was another excellent performance from Albon. And what about Logan Sargeant, Enzo? Logan Sargeant. He had a tougher weekend. Qualifying 15th and finishing 13th doesn't tell the whole story. He ran in the midfield for most of the race, but a clash with Bottas at the chicane earned him a 5-second penalty and he finished behind Lawson after the penalty was applied. Sounds like a rather challenging race for Sargeant, Enzo. Yes, it was. But that's the nature of Formula One. There are highs, and there are lows. It's all about how you bounce back from the lows that counts. It's worth noting that Sargeant's failure to finish in the top 10 was a bit of a letdown, considering Albon showed that their car had the potential to secure points. A non-optimal strategy and a clash with Bottas cost Sargeant the chance to earn his first ever point in Formula One. It seems like a missed opportunity for him, Enzo. Yes, William. But as we often see in this sport, every race is a learning opportunity, and I'm sure Sargeant will take these lessons into his future races. Absolutely, Enzo. Every experience, good or bad, contributes to the growth of a driver. It will be interesting to see how he bounces back in the next race. Indeed, William. That's the beauty of Formula One. There's always another chance to make your mark on the track. Let's see how the drivers will fare in the upcoming races. It promises to be a thrilling season. Well, what has been trending on internet discussions today, William? Let's have a look, shall we? Here's a topic that's been heating up discussions. A user by the name of hascraig_16 posted, why Red Bull's domination is perceived differently to Mercedes. It looks almost a certainty that Red Bull will go on to win every race this season, and what they and Max Verstappen have done this year is incredible. The Red Bull team seem to be so much better operationally than any other team in history. Interesting perspective, isn't it? Indeed, Enzo. and it seems to have sparked quite a discussion. A user called Reddit 0r_123 agrees, stating, "Fully agree with your point that we are witnessing a level of operational perfection unseen with any other combination of driver-team." And what does the opposition say? Well, user It's Been a Tough Year argues, this is where the new budget cap comes into effect. Before, incorrect technical decisions could and would be offset by spending more money, but now teams can't spend their way out of a wrong decision. Another user, Morel Supporter, adds to this point, the impact of the budget cap isn't talked about nearly enough. Each team basically has to sleep in the bed they made until the cap resets and then find a way to make the adjustments they think they need while simultaneously trying to keep pace with the leader who is also improving. That's quite an angle on the current situation. Anything else standing out? Yes, there's a comment from user Rivendell93 that I think is worth noting. This is an interesting take, and I do wonder how things would have looked if Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari were getting smoked by Williams because they got stuck with a car that just wasn't good. Ha ha ha, now that would be a sight to see, wouldn't it, William? Certainly. But as user Anakaiser points out, considering that Ferrari has consistently been one of the teams with the highest budget on the grid, it is more than just money that guarantees success. Absolutely, there's a lot more to it than just money. Well, that's quite a lot to digest. Thank you for that, William. Chaps and lasses, we've come to the end of another episode of F1 Motor Fever podcast. We certainly had quite the chat today, diving into the many winding turns of the most recent race. Thanks a million for joining us, your company truly enriches these discussions. Do us a favor, won't you? Subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss a beat of our daily chats. Share our little corner of the internet with your Formula One mates, be it on WhatsApp, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, or during a chinwag at the pub. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a note in the comments section. That's right, Enzo. And remember, chums, we're here for you at 15 and 19 o'clock sharp every single day, dishing out the latest on all things Formula One. There's never a dull moment, I promise you that. Oh, and here's to Felipe and Vicente, the wizards behind the scenes making all of this possible. Indeed, our hats off to Felipe and Vicente. We're all revved up for the next episode and we hope you are too, even though we can't spill the beans just yet. But rest assured, it's going to be a corker. Until then, as we always say, pedal to the metal, keep your gaze on the road, our channel's content is pure gold. Cue the vignette.